This did not happen to me, but I live in the area where it did take place. As far as I know, this is not a made-up story. My friends and I were discussing the scary things we had seen in the woods, and he told me a story that happened to his friend. So this guy was with 5 of his friends, and they were spending a few days in a cabin hunting and trapping. They were not drunk, but had had a few beers to unwind one night. So one of them goes out to the outhouse to go to the bathroom, and he swears that off into the woods, he hears the faint sound of a drum beating. So he finishes in the outhouse and goes into the cabin to tell his friends to come out and check this sound. So they all grab their rifles and walk out to the ridge their cabin was on, and down the hollow behind it, and back up the other side. It was a pretty rocky area, so the sound traveled far, and they could tell that just over the hill was where the sound was coming from. So the 5 of them spread out about 50 feet apart and walk up to the top. They couldn't see down over because of all the laurel bushes around, so the 5 of them wait, and one of them sneaked down through to see what it was. When he got there, he stood and watched for about 30 seconds to a minute before he turned around and went to his friends as fast as he could, telling them he saw evil and that they had to get the hell out of there right then. All he would tell them was he saw a bunch of naked men and women dancing around in a circle, chanting something in a foreign language. He never told them about everything he saw. The guy who told my friend this story was one of the guys who hung back and didn't see what happened. I'm not the best storyteller, so please bear with me. I was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, and still live on the east side. There is a public park near my parents' house called McAlpine Creek, which is mainly a large cross-country trail stretching miles across East Charlotte. The park is enveloped by hundreds of acres of dense forest and undeveloped land that is discreetly amidst busy streets and highways. Yet, you almost don't realize how big the forest stretches because of the infrastructure around it. There is a myth/folk tale about a devil church or Satan church deep within the park. There are a few videos on YouTube and other forum posts around the web of locals attempting to approach it. A simple Google search and you'll find them. In my senior year of high school, scouring the internet about this supposed church, I had somehow found a somewhat vague description of the location from someone who had attempted to go down the roads deep within the park to find it. My girlfriend at the time and I, one Friday night, decided to try and find the roads that lead to the church. We drove down the winding roads behind a Carmax that borders the dense woods of the park, where there is a small neighborhood of sorts. I think I had gotten 2 street names that were in close proximity to the spot. Cautiously driving down these quiet and dark roads, we had found a seemingly abandoned dirt track, offshooting from the paved road. Keep in mind, there are almost no streetlights anywhere. While driving for about 2 or 3 minutes, there had been a pickup truck in front of us maybe 50 feet or so. Upon seeing the dirt track and our interest piqued, we stopped the car to discuss what we wanted to do. We began to slowly pull onto the dirt track, and simultaneously the pickup truck ahead of us abruptly stopped and sat in place. We noticed this, having fully pulled into the dirt road at this point, and immediately stopped and stood frozen in panic. The driver of the truck quickly put his or her car in reverse. We could see the reverse lights turn on, and began to immediately back up toward us. I threw my car in reverse in panic, and attempted to turn back the way we had come. I was able to get turned around and back into drive fairly quickly. In reverse, the driver of the truck was accelerating very quickly toward us. I floored the gas of my Nissan Altima. The truck followed us for a few seconds, and then stopped. We never looked back. We never found the supposed church, but this happening scared the hell out of us, and I've never considered attempting to go back. Growing up, I had a childhood friend that lived relatively close by, and we were like two peas in a pod. We both were adventurous, believed in the paranormal, enjoyed astronomy, and generally just being outside. She was born in Alaska, and her dad lived there for quite a while, so they were always into camping, hiking, fishing, skiing, you name it. It was with my friend's family that I got introduced to fishing and did a lot of camping. This happened during the mid to late 90s, and we were maybe around 10 to 12 years old. It's been a while, so I can't remember exactly. One camping trip, we went to this lake in the forest that was surrounded by a meadow, and feeding the lake was a small stream leading out of the woods. Anyway, we played in the meadow and the stream all day while my friend's dad fished. The lake wasn't very big, and because it had a meadow all around it, he could keep an eye on our whereabouts while he fished. While messing around by the stream, the wooded area it was coming from gave me weird vibes. I can't explain it really, I just felt uneasy. Anyway, the day faded away into early evening, and it was time to leave and find a camping spot. My friend's dad picked up his fishing gear, and we all walked back to the truck on this long, winding path through the woods. Once in the truck, we dropped into a more remote area of that forest and made our way up this steep road that was so rough and at such an incline that I was convinced that my friend's dad was going to break his truck. He had a 4, maybe 6-cylinder Toyota pickup that was about as basic as a truck could get. In fact, I'm not even sure if the truck had 4-wheel drive, but being an Alaskan outdoorsman with years of experience, I trusted him. We finally made it up to the top, which was flat and relatively open with a big area of forest in the opposite direction from the road we drove up. We pitched our tents, got everything set up, and my friend and I decided to go explore the area. We were maybe 50 yards from the tent when we heard a big crack as a tree branch snapped in the woods behind us. We got quiet and looked in that direction, but didn't see anything. Thinking it was just a deer, we brushed it off. As we were walking, we heard it again, and whispered to one another about what it could be, but we kept going. It stopped briefly, and then when we were about 200 yards from our camp, we sat on a boulder looking down the steep wooded hill overlooking the dirt road from where we had come from. Suddenly, we heard another cracking branch from behind. Whatever it was seemed to be following us. Our imaginations going wild, we came up with everything from a serial killer stalking us in the woods to deer or Bigfoot. When we got back to the campsite, we told her dad what we had heard and how it seemed to be paralleling us. He kind of played it off as a black bear and secured all the food. Later on, my friend confided in me that her dad had gotten out his pistol and would be sleeping with it that night. My friend and I were sharing one tent, and he was in his own tent not far from us, so we figured everything would be okay. I awoke sometime in the middle of the night to hearing something or someone walking outside. As I lay still listening, I could hear it quietly circling the tent. It sounded like it was walking on 2 legs because it had a distinct rhythm on how it walked. Whatever it was, it sounded big, as I could hear its weight, if that makes any sense, as it put each foot down and walked. I could even hear relatively quiet but deep, heavy breathing at times. As I lay there listening, I could hear it wandering to other parts of the campsite and then back to our tent, almost as if it was walking in a big, repetitive loop. This went on for who knows how long. It felt like an eternity. Terrified and unable to wake my friend, I lay there and listened until I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I told my friend and her dad about it, but I don't know if they believed me or not. Interestingly, absolutely nothing in the camp was disturbed in any way. The ground was not very soft, and in some places was covered in grass, so there were no footprints either. This is something that I have never been able to explain, and to this day, lingers in the back of my mind when camping. I always wondered what it was that walked around our tent all night. When I lived in rural Maine, my boyfriend at the time took me on a drive in his truck. He wanted to show me something he said he had learned about from one of his college professors. We already kind of lived in the middle of nowhere, but we drove even further into literally nowhere. We were on this road that was 5 to 8 miles of just forest on both sides. No houses, no signs, no driveways, nothing. Then he pulls over near a slight break in the trees. There was a very overgrown old driveway chained off at the road with an old dilapidated sign that said private property. We parked on the road and walked in about half a mile, and there was this old abandoned log cabin house there. I don't know when it was built, but it was old enough to not have any connection to the electric grid and no electrical outlets inside. It was a bit odd, but my boyfriend said he had been there before and led me to a door in the back where we could break in. He mentioned that the last property owner said in their will that no changes could be made to the property after they died, like no agriculture or major renovations, so I guess that's why the land was never resold since nobody could do anything with it. I don't remember if we entered through the second floor somehow, or climbed upstairs once inside, but I remember being on this loft that overlooked the interior of the house with no railing. Definitely a 15-foot drop right at the edge of the loft. Maybe there weren't stairs inside at all, or a ladder? It was back in the fall of 2011 when I was a freshman in college, so it's a bit fuzzy. I remember seeing an old wood stove made of iron downstairs, and a countertop, but otherwise I think the place was pretty sparse and made entirely of wood. There was also no sink in the kitchen area, and no bathroom, so no plumbing either. The loft we were on had literally thousands of dead flies all over the floor. It was creepy and gross, and I know they could have gotten stuck there over the years, but the sheer number of them on every surface, and not being decayed turned to dust, was just so unnerving. My boyfriend for some reason decided that this was a nice place to smoke weed. I didn't want to stay, but he laid a blanket out over the flies and he sat and rolled a joint. I did take a couple hits, but started getting an uneasy feeling, so I stopped him. I'm a regular smoker, but this was just a crazy situation. Then, suddenly, I realized that the sun was setting and we were losing light fast. The house very quickly got this terrifying, impending doom feeling, and I knew that I just needed to get the hell out of that house. I expressed my concerns to my boyfriend multiple times, each time seeming more desperate to leave, but he wasn't worried and took his sweet-ass time hand-rolling himself a cigarette and taking all the unnecessary crap out of his pockets, laying them out on the blanket, and then slowly putting them away again. It was pissing me off that he wasn't taking me seriously, and I had such a sense of urgency to get out. I ended up getting out of the house first, and started hauling ass down that half-mile-long dirt driveway to get out and away. My boyfriend shuffled behind me, fumbling with things in his hands. He was practically a prepper and carried all sorts of things with him in his pockets, cargo pants, backpack, and etc. At all times, like flashlights, lighters, weed pipes, rolling papers, weed, rolling tobacco, and probably 20 other things that he thought was useful. I got out of the woods when we were just losing that last light before the true darkness sets in. Mind you, this country road has no streetlights the whole way. He had a flashlight, but I didn't feel that flashlights equal safety. I felt we were being watched, and whatever it was super negative. I don't know if I overreacted, or my boyfriend was literally just doped up and clueless, but I never really trusted him after that. I don't know why the hell I let myself get into that situation, and needless to say, he's not in my life anymore. I'm not sure if this is the right place to post this, but here it goes. I went to high school in a small Minnesota town, mostly farmland intersected by wooded areas, and of course, dozens of small lakes. One side of my neighborhood was bordered by a relatively large marshland that you could access by a slope that wound down to a trail. This trail curved through the marshland into a big patch of woods about 3/4 of a mile away. In the fall/springtime, after heavy rains, fog would often settle over the marsh as it was so much lower than the surrounding area, and it truly looked like something out of a Stephen King novel. After one of these rains, my brother and I, he was probably 13 and I was 16, decided it would be a great idea to go explore the woods in the fog. Although the sun was setting fast, we knew that we could make it to the woods in about 10 minutes if we left immediately. We grabbed a couple of flashlights knowing that it would be dark by the time we got home and headed for the trail. Once we were on the trail and moving, it hit us just how thick this fog was. We had only been walking for a minute or two, but we had absolutely no visibility behind us, and 5 to 10 feet max in front of us. We continued walking for a few more minutes, BSing about hearing noises and seeing red eyes in the distance the whole time, until we came to a curve in the trail. The curve signaled that we were only about 100 yards from the entrance to the woods. At this point, there is a small lake on the left side of the trail and miles of marshland on the right. It is important to note that we have moved further and farther away from any houses. Our house was the closest to the trail, and the trail moved away from our neighborhood rather than bordering any backyards. We began walking past the lake, and then we heard a splash. Definitely larger than a fish jumping, but we had no idea what else could have made that noise. We stopped, waited, and upon hearing nothing else, continued on our way. We couldn't have been going for more than 15 seconds when we heard cracking and shuffling in the brush up ahead to our left. We stopped dead in our tracks and waited. At the end of our eyesight, which could have been maybe only about 10 feet, a figure stepped out from the brush bordering the lake. The fog was too thick to make out any details, but it must have been at least 6'4" and very broad-shouldered. As the figure made its way into the middle of the trail, my brother gasped and it stopped. Its head shot over and looked right at us, and it just stared. It felt like an eternity, but it couldn't have been more than just a few seconds. I felt true terror in that moment, and I've never replicated that feeling. I began to take a small step backwards, and suddenly the figure took off running into the marshland. Again, there are no houses or buildings or anything for miles in the direction that it ran. Suffice it to say, my brother and I sprinted back to the house faster than I have ever run in my life. I still don't know what or who I saw that day, and I hope I never do. So that, my friends, was a collection of 5 backwoods horror stories. These are always fun stories to read. This is only my second collection of them, and already I love this topic, not gonna lie. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please do give the video a thumbs up, and if you really like it, please hit that subscribe button and that bell. That helps the channel grow, and the more the channel grows, the more I can do this. So, just saying. Also, if you'd like to, please leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of the video, what you thought of these stories, and whether or not you've had any backwoods encounters. And if you have had some sort of backwoods encounter, send it my way. There's a link down in the description where you can send your stories to me. All that said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic day. Hope that you enjoy your week, and I hope it's lovely outside. Hope you're able to enjoy the sun some if you can. I know things are a little confusing right now, but hopefully you're able to enjoy the world for what it is. I love you all. I'll see you on the next video, but until then, sleep well.